So welcome to this small and select group, which if it stays small and select, it means that we will be able to have a much more focused discussion at the end. So, you're very welcome in any case. My name is Ruth Kaufman and I chair the Pro Bono Operational Research Steering Group. And it's my privilege today to be chairing this third in our series of webinars aimed at charities and the third sector. This is the timetable that we're hoping to work to. So I get until 1:10 to do the introduction, which some of you may have seen before. And I hope you find interesting hearing it in a different voice again. And for some of you, it'll be completely new. And then Jane will take over for half an hour, and then we'll go into questions and answers. So if we move on to the next slide, please, Jane, I'm going to say welcome again. And add one more introduction, which I haven't really given, which is to Louise Allison from the OR Society, who has joined us as the manager of Pro Bono Operational Research following the retirement of our previous manager, who several of you may have known, Amy Hughes. So this is Louise's first webinar. It's also the first Zoom meeting that she's hosting on behalf of the OR Society. So welcome, welcome. If we move on, to the next slide, just a quick introduction to what is operational research. It's, as you see there, it's a scientific discipline which uses data analysis, computer modeling, a whole variety of other techniques, methods in order to improve insight, efficiency and effectiveness. And we call it operational research because it is making research, making those methods operational for organizations to help improve the way they run themselves. And it's used across the public and private sector, has been used since the early years or the run up to the Second World War, and it's used internationally as well, but less so in the third sector, hence this series of webinars. And as you can see from the collection of words underneath the blobs, it's used across organizations, everything that they do, whether decision making, whether system design, and at whatever stage of making things happen that you're working. If we can move on to the next slide, please. It's especially useful where decisions are difficult. So if they're complex, if they're messy, if they are lots of different stakeholders. So we've got an echo. Right, if we could just make sure everybody's on mute, thanks. These are all things which make decisions difficult, and I think they're all things which are pretty familiar to us in the third sector. But also, if we move on to the next slide, it's pretty useful. If we can move on to the next, that's right, for just general problem solving, just helping people for whom dealing with analytical, mathematical, IT-based problems is not their first job. OR people can help sort it out and make it happen. So if we move on to the next slide, please. There's a bit missing at the top, so if we can just, I think there. OR helps make better decisions in two steps, really. It's got basic set of methods, soft methods and hard methods, we call them. Soft methods looking at the people and the context, hard methods using mathematical modeling and analysis, many different methods that have been developed over the last 70, 80 years. To improve outcomes through using those models to help get better agreement about what you're trying to do, to help understand what data will support that agreement and point you towards the data, to help get deeper insight into how different factors influence each other, to prompt you to consider all available options, to provide you with thoughtful predictions of outcomes, estimates of risk, and to help you look at what happens if. What happens if disaster strikes? What happens if we do this? What happens if we don't do that? The session today, Jane is going to be looking at some of the hard methods that underpin those ways that the way OR makes better decisions. I'm just going to say one or two words about the pro bono OR service before introducing Jane. The OR Society set this up something a little more than 10 years ago as a service to third sector organisations to help third sector organisations who couldn't necessarily afford to pay for OR consultancy, because OR people work in some in universities, some in commercial consultancies, some within large organisations. And if an organisation isn't employing somebody, it doesn't have a useful local university who will help them do some things, then it would normally cost to get OR expertise. So we've set this up as a free service using OR volunteers who want to do something outside the day job. Next slide, please. And we've had some pretty positive feedback. Just to say, then that was my intro to OR, that was my intro to pro bono, and now I'm going to introduce our speaker, Jane. Jane's put some bullet points about herself there for us to work off. I think you can read those for yourself, but Jane is one of the most versatile modelers that I know. And she's a really hands-on, pragmatic analyst who's been really active in the pro bono service, has been a long-standing member of the Society, has worked in all aspects of the industry, and may also be able to tell us something about the Nepal variant, about which all has gone quiet through her hobby of Himalayan trekking, which I guess has been on hold for a little while. But that was my introduction, and now I'd like to hand over to Jane to talk to us, one more click, Jane, about your title will come up if you click. Thank you.
No, I know, but I wanted to talk about my current mix. Yes.
Okay, I'll hand over to you.
Just to say that
I'll hand over to you at this point.
In the last year,
thank you very much, Jane.
Thanks, Ruth. Yeah, just to say that in the last year, I've been doing more analytical consultancy, more university work, and more pro bono OR to make up for the hole in my life, which was Himalayan trekking. So, right, onto the, yes. So my title is Using Resources Better, How Modelling Can Help You Improve Your Efficiency and Effectiveness. I'm a very strong believer in modelling and how helpful it can be. So just in case you haven't got much of a feel for computer modelling, it's a way of looking at how we think something works in some sort of a model on a computer. We can use it to look at delivery of a service. We can use it to look at behavior of a donor. We can look at it, use it to look at how much inventory we've got. And then we can use it to understand what's likely to happen if things change. We can look at options. We can look at opportunities. It can help us make decisions. I used to live in the United States for a while, and they're very keen on car bumper stickers in the United States. And one of the bumper stickers I enjoyed was that OR analysts do it with models, which I thought was a very nice bumper sticker. So if you want to improve efficiency and effectiveness or overcome a problem you've got, then I think that models can really be invaluable to help you with that. There's quite a lot of standard models out there. There are some in Excel. There are also a lot of software packages. So there are software packages for logistics modeling, for example. Or you might have a one-off situation, in which case you might need to develop a purpose-built model. I always find they're the most fun because you start from scratch and see what happens. So what I want to do in this session, I obviously can't cover everything in the time we've got, but I'm going to look at some typical problems that third sector organisations could have, and some models that have been used and how the models have been used to improve the situation. Just before I go on to some examples, just why should you bother with a model? Why not just go with your gut instinct? Well, if you've got a very simple problem, you can cope. But if you've got a complex one, then it can be disastrous. And I know that the Sydney Opera House took about 20 years to build. I've just been reading a book about it, and a lot of things went wrong to start with. They actually changed the modeler halfway through, which can be disastrous. Right, and just to list a few problems that I've dealt with over my career, which, as Ruth said, has been very wide-ranging. I've done a lot of work in health for hospitals. I've looked at maternity services. There was an area where they had 3 separate maternity units, and they were thinking of combining them into one centralised maternity unit. And there were questions about how many beds do we need, how many staff do we need, what sort of staff. And they were trying to obviously match their capacity to what they thought the demand would be. And when you've got like that, when you don't know exactly what's going to happen when, obviously with maternity units, you've got a rough idea of when babies are going to be due to be born, but you don't know exactly when people are going to turn up. So that's a situation where a simulation model works very well. And there's going to be another webinar on simulation modeling in a few weeks' time. Then I worked in civil government for a long time. I looked at improving benefits processing to make the processing happen quicker, more efficiently, and hopefully more accurately as well. So we use process modeling for that, and I have an example of that in a few minutes' time. Then I was working in a very big government department. DWP was actually the biggest department in government, and they had a problem of how do you decide which member of staff should do which job. And there were all sorts of things to take into account. There were the staff skills, there were the job requirements, there were what the staff themselves wanted to do, there were distance to travel to different places to work, lots of different things you needed to take into account. And models that have been developed for that are known as multiple criteria decision analysis, where you can take into account lots of different aspects and build a model based on those aspects. Then the last one I wanted to mention in civil government is looking at government online services. I was there when government was just starting to put their services online, and they had all sorts of questions, such as how many people will use online? How many people will stop going into offices? How many people will stop ringing call centres? So what effect does that have on the number of officers we need, the number of call centres we need? And we looked at lots of different scenarios, and that was a purpose-built model. By the way, I meant to say, if you've got any questions, anything at any time, put it in the chat box or put it in the Q&A and we can answer it. So anything more you want to find out about any of this, just put it in the chat box. So, yeah, a couple of pictures there. YouGov, everybody uses it now. I've done a lot of work in logistics and supply chain management. The whole objective of supply chain management is getting the right product to the right place at the right time. I ran out of space there. There should be another phrase saying at the right price. So you want to do it cost effectively, efficiently. So there are loads of different aspects to this. Where should you put your warehouses? How many warehouses should you have? How should you lay out your warehouses? How should you do your deliveries from the warehouses? How much stock should you keep? Masses of questions there. Lots of what we call in the trade hard OR. In the third sector, it's always a bit more interesting than in logistics, in that you're not just looking for the cheapest answer. You've got a lot of different aspects to consider. So one example I did was looking at a call center. They were expecting an increase in calls. They wanted to improve their customer service, but they couldn't afford any more staff. So the question was, is it possible to reschedule our staff to different shift patterns and times that will work better? And again, I used a simulation model for that. The advantage of the simulation model is you can work closely with the clients, and they can say, what if we put an extra shift on Saturday mornings? And you can straight away do it and see what happens to your customer service. Then one more example for third sector. We looked at a charity that had the aim of matching volunteers to jobs. And they'd got a lot of routine processes, which they were spending a lot of time on. And what they wanted to do was try to make those processes more efficient. And that way they could release staff and volunteers to do more value added activities. So that was a process model. So lots of different situations and lots of different models you can use. No questions yet. Obviously, I'm very understandable. So at the top is a picture of a map I did for a logistics problem for a company that actually had the job of servicing equipment. And they had a contract saying they had to get to each customer within an hour. So where should they have their service hubs and how long would it take them to reach their customers? And the picture at the bottom is developing a simulation model for a call center. It starts off with the arrival profile. So in the night, you don't get many phone calls, you get a lot more during the day. Then things split up, you've got phone calls and you've got people sending online queries. They go into queues, handled by staff. You've got your staff and you design your shifts. So quite a complicated model that one was. Right, I want to do a poll now. Louise, could you put the poll up, please? What I want to know is why you might like to use a model in your organization. So if you care to tick one or more of those boxes and then submit it, then Louise can tell us the answers when you've done it.
Perhaps we should explain, Jane, this isn't a test question that people understand what you've said so far. It is actually, if you are from an organization which is considering using OR, what sort of uses might you personally have in mind, which will help Jane keep that in mind, I think, while she talks. So it might be that not everybody wants to complete this poll.
So yes,
right, yeah.
Fill it in at your own leisure, yes, and we'll go back to that at the end. Right.
Can everyone, is the poll on everyone's screen, or would you like me to end it so that you can carry on, Jane?
You could probably end it, I think, yes.
Yeah. would you like me to tell you?
Oh, go on. What do we know?
So 6 people voted.
Yes.
Planning for the future.
Yes.
Everyone wanted to know about that.
Good. Yes.
Hotly followed by processes and decision making. Then the way we measure our impact.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And then logistics, use of staff, and the way you allocate staff and volunteers.
Lovely. Yes. Planning for the future is great fun. I'm doing a big consultancy job at the moment, and we're trying to plan for the next 20 years. That takes some doing. Who knows what life's going to be like in the next 20 years. Yes.
Planning for the past is so much easier.
Yes, isn't it? Yes. I like the idea of backcasting rather than forecasting, but you don't get much kudos for doing that. Oh, I can't go on to the next one, Louise. I'm dead. Oh, there we are. Yes. All right. So the first example that I wanted to spend a bit longer on was this was a pro bono job that we did. The client was a charity that were helping people into work. So they were helping them into employment, self-employment, education or training. And they didn't have enough job vacancies for their clients. So they wanted to increase the number of job vacancies by improving, streamlining their processes. So the PBOR team, I wasn't one of this team, they had workshops with the clients to identify the processes that they were using at the moment and the problems that they seemed to be having at the moment. And after discussion, the PBOR team recommended more streamlined processes. So if we look into this in a bit more detail, I don't know if you've come across this, but it's a very nice, simple model that anyone can use. It's called a cause and effect model. It's sometimes called an Ishikawa diagram because it was invented by a Japanese guy called Ishikawa. I'm pretty sure it was to do with car manufacturing in Japan. So the crucial problem that this organization had was that they weren't getting the right sort of vacancies for their clients. So that was the main problem that they had in the big box at the left. So then they worked backwards and thought, what is causing the fact we're not getting the right vacancies? So if you look at the top, they said, well, the vacancies aren't actually getting to the client. Why aren't the vacancies getting to the client? There's too many steps between the source of the vacancy and the client. And so that might be something to do with how we're actually communicating with the client. And similarly, you can go through all these, get your main reason for a problem, and then what is producing that reason. And they've got a whole load of reasons by the time they've finished as to what the problems are. So very helpful way of looking at any organization. If you've got a problem, what is causing that problem? Now, the next thing I mentioned was process mapping. And the PBOR team did 2 process maps before and after. Now, if you look at the before process map, the charity had 3 sets of teams. One team dealt with the clients. They gave them advice, information, supported them. Another team, Team B, worked with employers, and they got vacancies from employers, generated employer contacts. And then there was the job of getting the clients and the vacancy together. And so the problem was that the original process map, the team that dealt with the clients and the team that dealt with the employers were separate and didn't have enough communication. And so they never got the vacancies to the clients, or the right sort of vacancies for the clients. So a second process was done at the bottom, whereby they recommended that a single team saw all the way through, looking at the vacancies from the employers and the clients and putting them together. And that way there wasn't the problem of communication, and they managed to get more jobs for the clients. So the result of that was that the charity changed its processes, and they got a lot better results for their clients. So process maps recommended. Again, pretty easy, anybody can do it, and there's some fairly easy software that you can download and use to draw the maps if you want to make them pretty and look on the computer. Otherwise, you can draw them on paper or on a whiteboard. Now, the one that everybody wanted, planning for the future. Lots of different ways you can do this. There are standard models for forecasting future demand for a service. You can do that in Excel. Anybody can do it in Excel. There's also specific forecasting software packages. Another way of planning for the future is assessing different options using decision trees. And you can also do purpose-built scenario models, which I'll look at in a minute. So starting off with forecasting demand, we've done some work with food banks, and we've got a chart of monthly food bank demand. Now I'm just going to change this around. Get better now. Can you see it better? Okay, so we had demand month by month from a food bank. And the question was, what are we expecting to happen next year? Well, the very simplest way of doing that is to go on Excel. One of the things you can do on Excel, and I don't know if you've done that yourselves, but it's quite easy to pick up. You can do what's known as adding a trend line. And when you ask it to add a trend line, you can say what sort of a line you want. I've gone for a straight line here, linear, but there are lots of different shapes you can use. You can tell it how long forward in the future you want to forecast. So I said forecast for 3 periods into the future. And I've got my pictures in the way again. Oh, well, I lost that. Let's go back again. You can also tell it to put the equation of the line on the chart. So I've done that there. I've carried on the forecast for another 3 months. I've got an equation, and the equation shows that on average, demand is going up by around about 90 each month. So very simple, basic method for forecasting. We've got our trend, it's going up. It's more or less going up by a straight line, roughly 90 a month. But of course, life is a bit more complicated than that. So Excel has a data analysis tool pack. One thing it can do is what's known as a moving average. So you can take account of different times of the year. Is demand higher in the winter than it is in the summer, for example, regularly? It's also got another forecasting method called exponential smoothing, which will let you forecast, take this month and forecast just the next month. Now, there's also a lot of other forecasting models around that can take into account what it is that's driving the demand. So what we haven't got in here, for example, is we haven't got anything that might be affecting demand. So, for example, when the COVID crisis hit, a lot of people were made redundant, and so there were more people needing food parcels. So if you need to get external factors in, you need slightly more complicated models. So I'll leave forecasting for a moment now and go on to a way of looking at what if scenarios. So a very simple idea, decision trees. What if we offer a new service to our clients? Well, two things might happen. You offer this new service, the users come along, great, or nobody comes along. If a user comes along, the user might think, yes, this is a great service, I'm going to use it. Or they might think, no, been there, don't like that, don't want it. If the user does join in, then there are different levels of benefit. They might get a lot of benefit from it. They might get a little bit of benefit from it. And of course, if the user doesn't engage, you've gone to develop this service and it's costing you, even though that your user isn't using it. And if the user doesn't come, well, the offer might have helped them, but who would know? So you can do that with any new service that you're thinking of developing. And what you can do for that is you can put on for each of these how likely you think it is. So if we offer this service, is it sort of 75% likely that somebody will come and 25% that they won't? That sort of thing. You can get the chances and then you can do some estimates of what it's likely to be worth to you. So quite a nice way of starting from scratch and saying, is it worth us developing this new service? Then the last one that I thought would really generate well with you here. About 10 years ago, there was the SARS epidemic and people in government started getting really edgy about the SARS epidemic might develop into a pandemic and go worldwide, and how do we keep the government going? So every government department had the task of building a model about how they would cope with a pandemic. So I was in DWP and I built this model about how we could deal with a crisis like a pandemic. So if you think about some assumptions, first of all, you're going to get people off sick. People off sick, then the numbers of staff available go down. On the other side, of course, in DWP, they deal with all the job seekers claims. So the demand for job seekers allowance was going to go up. So you've got a problem straight away, demand going up, but staff going down. So you'll have the staff that you require for that. Then every bit of DWP had to develop contingency measures to say, okay, we'll forget about doing this particular bit of the business for now, so we can concentrate on the importance thing. And then you've got the performance measures. So we developed this model in Excel. We gave it to all the departments and we let them play around with the different contingencies and see what would happen to the staffing levels. You'll notice we got in school closures, which is exactly what happened this time. And so the number of staff available goes down, you need more staff, you have to put in contingency plans and so on and so forth. So a year ago, I'd long since left government, I contacted some of my staff that I had worked with and I said, you better get that out of the cupboard, and they did. So a very useful model there. Running on a bit, I'm running a bit short of time. If you're interested in geographic models, and at the very simplest version, you need to know where your clients are. So I've been working with a charity that helps families with young children, and they have volunteers that visit the families. So of course, you need to know where the families are. You need to know where the volunteers are. You need to know which volunteer should visit which family. And the question that this charity is looking at the moment is, should they be trying to recruit some new volunteers in some areas? This, again, is something that you can do very easily yourself. There's a very useful geocoding tool that can map clients and volunteers. I was going to click on this and show you, but I'm running short of time. So when you get the video, you can do it yourself. So that's just given me a map straight away of where the clients are. You can then overlay that with where your volunteers are, and you can see very easily where you've got areas with a lot of clients, for example, around here, but not enough volunteers. I'll leave that one for now and go on to a much more complicated model that you couldn't do yourself. There are a lot of mathematical models for helping you to decide where to site things. They're known as center of gravity models. And for that, I used it for a company that was doing repairs and maintenance. But if you look at where your clients are, where should you be locating drop-in centres, for example, that sort of thing can help you with that. And I'm doing it in time. I'll go back to the geocoding one. So what I've summarised, I haven't shown you by any way it means every possible model you could use. As I've already said, the simulation models are very powerful, and there's going to be a webinar just on simulation. But computer models, you can look at your options, you can understand what's likely to happen if you change the way you operate. It'll help you with decision making. It'll help you, I hope, improve your efficiency, effectiveness, and planning for the future, which is a very difficult thing to do at the moment. There are a lot of standard models that you can use yourself, very simple ones in Excel, others that you can develop yourself in Excel or by using specialist software, and sometimes you need a one-off model. And certainly, if you want to discuss a situation where modelling might help, then that's what we're here for. Now, as I've got 2 minutes, I shall go back to my geocoding tool. I didn't believe how easy this was when I found it. Easy, come on, be nice. It did it perfectly before I started this, yes. There you are, batch geocoding. You just copy and paste your list of postcodes, and there you are.
Jane, I think
that's all you need to do.
Change which screen you're sharing so people can see where that link has taken you.
Thank you very much, Louise. Yes, I expected it to work really well. I'm not slick enough with this. Let's do that. New share. There we are. I'm trying anyhow. I missed it completely. Oh, don't worry about it. I've run out of time anyhow, but it's a very easy coding tool. You just stick your postcodes in and press the button, and out comes your map. Thoroughly recommended. So that's about all for me. I see we've got 4 things on the chat. Let's have a look there. Oh, no questions.
I think, firstly, Jane, can I say thank you very much? That was a lightning tour of some of the models that.
Oh yes, yeah. I've got lots more models as well in my cupboard.
I know you have got a huge number more. but yes, half an hour at a time is a really helpful bite. So thank you very much for that. And do please, if you're in the audience and can put the your screen on, please do. If you would like, rather than putting a question into the chat, since we're a small group, if you'd like to just stick your hand up to make any comments or ask any questions, then also please do. But also, while we're waiting for people to think of what they might want to ask, Jane, would you like to put the link to the batch coding tool into the chat so that people can cut and paste it if they
You
want
think
to?
I'm capable of doing this, do you?
I have every confidence in you.
Right, I'll work on that.
Jane, there's a question from Song Tao about where they can go to find some standard available models.
Yes, it's very easy for me to say the standard available models. Unfortunately, a lot of them are rather expensive. So if, for example, you want an all singing, all dancing forecasting model, you can fork out for something like SPSS, which is very expensive, or you can use R if you're into computer coding. If you go into R and use R, that is just a capital letter R. It does have coding for doing a lot of these things itself. There are simulation models. I have heard of somebody who's building a free simulation model, but again, with simulation, you would normally expect to pay, but a lot of places will give you a free trial. So for example, there's a simulation model called Simulate that you can get a free trial for. I don't know that we've got a summary. Yes, we have. If you look on the Pro Bono OR website, you will see there's a list of free available software. So start by having a look at that. Can we put a link to there, Louise? A link to the Pro Bono website, and I don't know if you can actually find where the list of the software is.
But just to add to your answer, Jane, Song Tao, it partly depends what you're trying to do or what you want to do. So if you want to either ask now or write in separately, you've got Louise's or the Pro Bono address, or if not, we'll show it later, to explain what sort of software capability you're looking for, then we may be able to point you in a better direction.
Yes, and it's also a question of how good you are at manipulating things, whether you want something that's simple to use or whether you're quite happy with more complicated stuff as well. So that's that aspect. Right, I'm going to be hunting for the, oh, yes. Food bank, yes. Yes. How easy it is to, how easy is it to understand the behavior of those that don't engage? Any answers to that, Ruth?
I think that's a research question. Basically, if you want to understand behaviors, you either look at the literature that tells you why it's happened elsewhere, or you talk to people. And you talk to the people in your neighborhood, and you talk to other providers of service in your neighborhood and find out what's going on. So understanding behavior is a whole big area on its own. I'm sure you're very aware of that, Daniel. But so you start off with trying to find out what's going on. The question is whether you can use the information that you find out. So if you find out reasons for non-engagement, then you can start thinking about ways that you might address that if you want greater engagement, or respect it, that greater engagement is inappropriate. A lot of these issues are very much horses for courses. So, there are standard models, but your own circumstance, your own business, and your own users are the ones that you need really to understand. So, does that help?
Yes, I think it does.
Oh, where are you? That looks exciting.
I borrowed a garden party from my mother's place in Malta.
As well as asking questions about what Jane did say, if there's anything that you were hoping to hear about that she hasn't covered, then do flag that up as well.
I've put up the link to the batch geocoding tool.
Thank you.
Jane, sorry, was it the list of all the free software that you wanted me to put link to?
Yeah, if you could.
I think that might be it. If you want to just double check.
Thanks, Louise. You're doing a grand job to say it's your first week in the job.
I should say that that list of software was originally produced for the use of our pro bono volunteers so that they had some resources. But I think it's all available to anybody, so you just need to try it out and see if it works for you, and see what you can do. But if you do feel that you need any help, there's no obligation with a volunteer. You can always just ask to phone up somebody for a chat. We can find somebody who could talk to you rather than feeling that you have to actually have a big deal of a problem. There's a lot of people out there who've got a spare 10 minutes, half hour, who'd be happy to share what they know, just because they're passionate about the potential uses of their topic.